Okay, so it says that we're streaming, even though it's not yet showing up on the
channel.
It just takes a minute to get it going. So we're up to 24 subscribers. So yay.
It's fun.
Yeah,
I know, it's exciting.
I got to do a call out to Kelly at work because she was number 20. She goes, you got to sell it to everybody. I was number 20. So I said, all right, I'll do a shout out to you.
To who? To Kelly Moore?
Kelly Crawford. She's our evidence technician. I was at work today. She's our evidence manager.
That's awesome.
And she wants to know the story about the Minutiae Trois name. So
did you tell her?
No, not yet.
Come on.
Are you going to tell it at the beginning?
No.
It's
one of those Pat Wertheim things.
It's a cute story.
Pat Wertheim stories.
There we go. We have. Okay. So let me just adjust my screen just a touch so that I can see both and the comments. Hang on 1 second.
Yep.
Okay.
There we go.
All right, so we're good. We're officially started. Just adjust my screen. So right now it looks like, and I'm still trying to get the hang of what all these little buttons mean.
Right.
But we are currently streaming. We are live streaming, so that's exciting. We do not have any intro music to play, but Doreen did offer to sing a song. Right, Doreen? To sing
I offered what?
To sing a song to get us into episode 1?
No.
No. Okay. All right. All right. So right now we have, it looks like we have 4 streaming, so 4 watching our stream. So I guess we're good to go then. So welcome to our very first episode 1 of Minutiae Trois Podcast. I am co-host Rebecca Heinrich. I am in North Carolina. I have been a certified Layton examiner since 2011 and have been in the field since 2001, where I learned as a crime scene investigator / print examiner, and then was able to kind of funnel my energies, I suppose, into Layton print work specifically. So that was a good fun. I've had a great career so far, 20 something years, and I'm still excited about it. So that's me. And how about you, Doreen?
I am Doreen Huntington. I am retired. Yes. Started in Cleveland, Ohio Police Department a long time ago. And then went to the state of Wisconsin, and I was there for 3-4 years. And then in '94 moved here to Wisconsin. I was to North Carolina, and I'm with the Guilford County Sheriff's Office. I retired a year ago. I got certified, Rebecca, in 1993. So been around a long time and seen a lot of changes. I'm pre APHIS and Henry classification and all that good stuff. So goes way back. So, and our special guest today.
That's right. And our guest is Michelle Triplett. So Michelle has actually been just an influential person in the field for many years. I don't remember a time in my career where I don't remember seeing your name someplace. I remember, I think my first exposure was the dictionary. I remember when the dictionary came out so many years back, and that was just an awesome resource. So I'm going to give you just a second or two to introduce yourself as well, Michelle.
Okay, well, I'm Michelle Triplett. I work in the Seattle area at King County Sheriff's Office, and I started working there in 1990, started at the very bottom, worked my way up to Layton Print Examiner and Layton Print Supervisor, and now I'm the Forensic Operations Manager. And the dictionary started really just as my notes getting ready for certification, keeping everything in a list so I could review it. And when I make lists, this one just kind of got out of hand a little bit. And once I had it so thorough, I feel like now I have to keep it up. You don't want to let it go. But the last version was 2015 at the II Centennial, and I'm just doing the new version, and I'm hoping to have it done by the end of this week.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great.
Yeah. A lot of new terms in the last couple of years within the discipline. I don't think there's any new meaning behind them, but the words people choose to use are different.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the vocabulary in some ways it stays the same, but then new things develop. There's new little nuances. And I've kind of noticed over time how things have changed just from when I had started. And as things have developed and gotten a little bit more progressive, I do remember hearing, and it wasn't something that happened when I was in training, but I remember hearing someplace that the little circle that we use for the identification symbol with the slash through it initially meant that the circle meant the print was a value. And if you slashed it, it meant that the print was identified. I didn't know that. So the entire first bit of my career, and I put my little circle with a slash and I made an ident, found out later that actually that had meaning. The little circle had meaning. I did not know that. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah,
That's
it's interesting to look back because it is kind of an odd symbol.
It kind of is. And there were symbols for value and just various things that I didn't know. So I just thought that was kind of neat.
No, it's amazing for me, just, starting in 1985 at Cleveland and at the Cleveland Police Department, and we had an anhydrous and we used white powder on a clear backing card. And, so now we have APHIS and we have all the different methods that we can use to enhance prints and stuff. And then, because back then before APHIS, if you didn't have a suspect, you didn't know, you couldn't compare it to anybody. And I remember one time we had 4 simultaneous prints, like of the right hand. And so with Henry classification, right, you always, whatever the right hand was, most likely it would have been the same pattern on the left hand. So we did a shot in the dark and classified a card based on those 4 prints. Didn't find them, but, that's what we had to work with back then. So, we used what we had. So APHIS is definitely, out of this world, that what it can do. So.
Yeah, huge. Yeah, true.
Yeah, we used a fish tank for our super glue and a steam iron for our anhydrin.
Yes.
Yes. And you didn't even think twice about it. And now there's fuming chambers and action for both, humidity chambers.
Oh, it's amazing what the technology has done in the years since, I started, and I can't even imagine what it's going to be like, 5 years from now, even. I think it's going to be great with all the new ones coming up. So.
Yeah. Part of the hope with this little podcast experiment is that we have the opportunity to introduce ideas and thoughts and concepts and suggestions and just different ways of thinking on certain topics. And it's kind of hard to do that sometimes when you go to a conference or you are in a training and you see somebody that you think you recognize, but you can't always put a name and a face together, so you're not 100% sure. So hopefully this podcast is going to kind of help introduce us to names, faces, ideas, and concepts. And one of the thoughts that Doreen and I recently had, and we were kind of mentioning this with Michelle as well, is talking about people who have been influential in the field. And 2 of those people we unfortunately recently just lost. So Pat Wertheim and Casey Wertheim were huge, and the contributions that they offered to our discipline were just immeasurable. It's just hard to articulate. There really are no words to what they did that kind of helped kind of guide us and put us in the direction that we're going now. But I know you worked a lot with Pat. You had a lot of experiences with Pat. Michelle, do you remember how you met Pat?
Yeah, I was voted on to SWIGFest in 2007. Before that, I'd emailed him. There was Casey's chat board, and that was like the first opportunity people had to communicate with other people besides at a conference. So the chat board was just an amazing thing at the time, and had a lot of conversations, with Pat. And then I started teaching a class, and I taught it first internally at my own agency, one class, and Arizona was going to send a bunch of people up to take it. And instead I said, why don't I just come down there and can teach it to more people? So I went down there, and because Pat lived in Arizona at the time, he took the class, which is amazing for somebody that had been in the discipline for decades to take somebody a brand new class, so I met him at the class. And then a couple years after that, when I was voted on to Swig Fest, I got to see Pat twice a year for a week-long trip every time.
Okay. Yeah, my first time was took his class in Providence, Rhode Island. So, or not Providence, excuse me, Plymouth, Massachusetts. And it was just my first experience with him, and just he impacted me just because of his passion and then how much fun he made that class. And he was amazing just to watch as he would go through those packets of Leighton prints and just, he didn't have them memorized, but he just could find the matching, known so quickly in the clues that he gave us. He was a very good inspiration for me. His passion was very, very good. And his jokes were very, very good. He has some good ones.
I was about to say, he had a very fun sense of humor.
Yes.
He just, and I didn't have a lot of experience with him because he was no longer teaching when I got into the field, but I ended up taking classes with Casey. So Casey was one of the, I think the class I took with Casey was the advanced radiology course. And that was back like in 2002. And it was just, Casey was just amazing as well, that both of them just had this ability to articulate the information. And so my communication with Pat was always very lighthearted, and he was always very open and honest and happy and friendly. And my communication with Casey was less like, I don't know, I don't want to say joyful, but he was more like businessy, but he was so pleasant. He was so nice. He was so easy to engage with as well in his own way. So I was so sad to see that they both of them have left us at about the same time. So that is definitely something that has been weighing on my mind since I heard about it, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah, Casey had left the discipline. And so a lot of the newer examiners really don't know his name as well as the three of us do.
Yeah.
But the things he brought to the discipline and left behind for us were just amazing. He really did have a big influence, even though his name isn't as well known as Pat's.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The weekly detail was excellent. I always enjoyed, getting that every week, I think. Right.
Yeah, every Monday morning.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'd send it Sunday night. So it was super exciting if you checked your email the night before, and then you were all ready Monday morning to discuss it with people.
Oh,
It was so much fun. Always. It was like a topic a week.
right.
Something new.
And, that chat board was always so interesting. You'd jump into the chat board and so many discussions and so many things that were happening and so many opinions. And it was just, I loved going into that chat board and just seeing what the most recent, at the time, I guess, trending topic was in the weekly details. They had they left a stamp for sure. They definitely left their stamp. So, but it looks like we now have 7 people watching. I'm very excited. And for those that are watching, you are absolutely welcome to chat some comments if you want to add some information, or you have a story about Pat or Casey or anything that we're talking about, or you have a story from something else that you would like to share. Feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll go ahead and dip into that and see if anything fun comes up that way. So far we're doing good. And
I gotta do a shout out to Kelly, who I work with. She was our 20th subscriber. So anybody who is not subscribed yet, just go ahead and subscribe, because then they'll get notices on when our next episode's going to be, right, Rebecca?
Yes. And of course, we're still planning those types of things. We don't necessarily have a episode 2 planned yet, but it's coming. We're going to keep moving with it. We're going to try to keep the momentum going. So I'm excited about it. I think this is going to be a ton of fun. And we got so lucky. I was so excited when Michelle said that she would join us. I was like, oh my goodness, that's excellent.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. So are there any topics, Michelle, that you can think of that have garnered interest recently?
Recently, the big focus of mine has been on what is task relevant. You know, the term's kind of been thrown out there. Some people have said, well, what does that even mean? And it's really just what is relevant to the task at hand, what information is relevant versus what information is biasing. And it doesn't mean that you have to blind any information. It's just acknowledging what information do you need to perform your job. I think there's just thinking about it off the top of my head, there's a lot of aspects, questions we ask that you have to go back and ask yourself, why do we ask those questions? Like if I'm doing a comparison and I've got some questions with it and I bring it to somebody and say, do you know if this was the known print, an inked print or a live scan print? Doesn't matter.
Right.
You know, is that going to change your tolerance level, or why are we asking those questions? Or asking, was this an anhydrine print? Or, you know, do you need to know the substrate in order to perform a comparison? Or do you know if it's in blood? So those kind of topics, things have been just things I've discussed with people. And then just recently, the OSEC came out with a new, I'm not sure if it's a standard or a best practice, but it's on what is task relevant. And so they list what is task relevant. They've got a list of about 8 different things. I don't know if you've seen the document, but in my mind, the items they put on there I'd like to know why they're task relevant. Like when it says that you need to know the substrate or the matrix, why do you need to know that information?
Right.
Will it change your conclusion at all?
I think it's more important to know orientation for one thing, you know, so that you know, like if it's a window or if it's a bat, you know, that you know how it might have been gripped. I don't know necessarily if I really, as long as the known prints are good, I don't care if they're inked or live scan. But I guess I think we included it on our bench notes and stuff is because other people had. So we were following leads from other people, other organizations, right? But all we've been ever since like Daubert and stuff is like, you know, you got to be transparent. You got to be transparent. And so part of me is thinking like, well, if we don't tell them everything, or if we don't tell them where the print was originated from or what it was on, they're going to think, oh, then you're hiding something or something like that. So I think maybe that's why we probably have it on our bench notes. Our ACE-V sheet is just transparency. That's the first thing when you brought the topic up. That's the first thing I thought was, you know, are we doing it so that we're transparent so that they can't question us on it?
Right. If you have a piece of paper and the print is kind of a grayish black, and a lot of people put like, do you know that it was the piece of paper was powdered with black powder, or if they used mag powder, or if they used PD? You know, but I think we assume as examiners that, oh, it was probably mag powder or something, you know, when that's not, it's just a guess. It doesn't mean somebody told you that information. Or if it's purple, then it's like, okay, it was an anhydrine print. But if we're not writing down whether we know that information for sure, or if it just gives the same appearance of those things.
Right. Yeah. For the blood prints though, I had a homicide case and there was a bloody print. She was killed in the back seat and the child's car seat had been taken out. And there was a print on it and it was, you could tell a pattern, but I haven't had that much experience with bloody prints. I mean, as far as comparing one every week, no, you're not, you know, you're lucky if you get one a year kind of thing. And there was a lot of distortion on this. And so I think in this case, yeah, for me to say that it wasn't blood was important. And I still never did figure that print out. It was so, I couldn't tell what were the ridges and what were the furrows on a lot of it. And then it kept going, you know, tonal reversal from one to the other kind of thing. So in that case, I think it was important to have it with a bloody print, but it didn't help me any.
Right. And the fact, even if you didn't know it was a bloody print, you could still say it's highly distorted and the ridges keep changing from white to black. So everything that you're using to arrive at your conclusion is in the print. The knowing that it was in blood helps explain well, that is common in bloody prints, but it doesn't necessarily mean, you know, that knowing that it was blood wouldn't have changed your conclusion at all.
Correct. Right.
I think sometimes having information about your substrate, though, can also have an effect on how at least for me, how I'm going to look at the print. So if it has some texture to it, and I understand that that texture can affect the way I'm looking at my various level 2 information, I tend to have a little bit different tolerance than if it's a clean and clear and ready, easy to go looking at print without background texture, without background interference. So sometimes that texture, knowing that it came from something like a windowsill versus a drinking glass, it can make a little bit of a difference because it's going to change the way maybe potentially I'm going to look at the print, the way I'm going to try to analyze it when I'm trying to understand why the information is doing what it's doing, why the minutia looks the way it looks. But I do kind of agree with Doreen. There have been a lot of times where it feels like every step we take is questioned in court. So did you document this? Did you document that? Are you going to put this information, make it available for a defense review? And that information, like Doreen says, it kind of does feel like if we don't do it, it's almost like we're being accused of not being transparent enough. And so it feels like there's a little bit of a line where we're trying to ensure that the work we're doing is accurate and ensure that the calls we're making are based off correct data and are based off of, all of everything that we can put into it. But we also don't want to go so far, at least my thought is, we don't want to go so far as that we start muddying waters and opening doors and making it feel like, well, that was more information that was actually necessary. And so we actually did ourselves a disservice by adding so much into what we document. And it does feel like a really very fine kind of line to walk sometimes, but we do the same thing, and gosh, for the longest time, we do write what the substrate is, what the matrix is, how much pressure there might be, is there movement, does it look like there's moisture? We really try to document the heck out of these things, and it's every single print.
Right. When I started, we would take pictures of prints, and then we would actually look at the negative strip. We weren't even making a picture out of the negative strip. So we were comparing we'd put the negative strip on a light box, look at the negative strip for the latent, and the known card was next to it. And you would do a comparison and write down, this latent came from the number 3 finger of this person. With the amount of documentation, some people are saying is required. I'm just going to say the amount of documentation that people are recommending. Mm-hmm. Now you're doing so much more in every case. And my question is it needed? Because now if you work for a small agency that doesn't have a lot of cases and you have the time to do it, or if you're in training, to me, it's huge to do that while you're in training so that people can see what you're seeing. But if you document every latent in every case all the time, just for the reason, well, if they ask me for it in court, now I have it. So you're doing all these steps in 1,000 comparisons when only 1 out of every 1,000 comparison goes to court. To me, it's not efficient, especially if you work for an agency that has a lot of cases. I can do, you may be able to do a couple hundred cases a month. Whereas if you take all the other steps that they're introducing and suggesting to do, it might bring it down to 30 or 40 cases a month. And then it's not serving justice if you're not finishing a lot of the other cases and they're passing the statute of limitations. So it could be, one, because I'm old school and I never had to do that at the beginning. It also could be, I do testify a lot, but when I testify, if they ask me those questions, I can have the information later to tell them. I don't need it to do the comparison.
Okay. How do you, well, before I move up, I just want to say I'm checking the chat and we do have some comments, so that's pretty exciting. So I want to thank you all that are commenting. We have somebody saying, let's go, Michelle. This is Triple Group. Let's go, Michelle. King County in the house. Woohoo! That's awesome. And Bill Shade, I hope I pronounced that correctly. He says, wouldn't the Crancy note say where the print was? What was the substrate and what was the matrix? So I mean, the card will at least tell us where the print was lifted from. It doesn't always give a lot of other detail. At least we don't see the crime scene notes. We only get the 10 print, I mean, the latent card.
Okay.
So we have some information. And then he says, the question seems to be knowing those things needed by the latent examiner when they do a comparison. A little further, he says, it's not about transparency for the latent examiner. It's why did you need to know? We have Joanna saying hello from Ohio.
I gotta break that in. That's my niece.
That's awesome. Thank you, Joanna.
Way to go, JoJo.
Yay,
He's a
Ohio.
detective up in Elyria, Ohio.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. And so I just kind of wanted to make a mention to the folks that are starting to pop into the comments there into the chat. But how do you, so I don't disagree with you, Michelle. I think that if there's a more efficient way to do things and it still serves the appropriate purpose, you're still getting the work done and you're doing it correctly and you're not bogging yourself down with tons and tons of documentation or tons and tons of workflow processes. What would you say? Like, how would you recommend that an agency that have a large amount of cases document their work, still satisfying the necessary information in case, you know, there's a need to go to court? What do you recommend? Like, what would you say rather than checkboxing for every little thing you see on every print? What would be another way to do it potentially?
Well, first I'd like to say, I'm not advocating to blind that information. I don't think blinding it is just another inefficient step. So I don't think that's necessarily the answer. And I think a lot of that information is interesting. I just don't necessarily think it's necessary information to have. So for me, for documentation, if I do a comparison and it's fairly simple, I just write down it's the number 3 finger of this person. If I go to court and they say, well, you didn't document what you saw that day.
Yeah.
I would say I can show you today how the conclusion is supported and how my degree is in statistics and math. So I equate it with when you're adding 200 plus 200, you don't have to show 400 little tick marks. You know, but later on, if somebody says, how did you arrive at your conclusion? I can show them after the fact. I don't have to have the documentation from the day that I arrived at the conclusion. But as things get more complicated, more complex, I'll say, then I think it is important to note things. So if there's a discrepancy, I think personally that should be noted. There's a discrepancy in the top due to some type of distortion. Is it twisting? Is it a double tap? What is the reason for that? And what kind of support do you have in the print to show you that's the reason? Is it scarring? Because it's been a joke for a few years that everybody says every difference it's due to distortion. Well, what does that mean? There's a lot of different kinds of distortion. So writing down that scarring, and I know it's scarring because of the crimping of the ridges, or this one's twisting. I know it's twisting because there's a fault line in this direction. Or is it a double impression? I know it's a double impression, not because any information somebody gave me. It doesn't matter if it's a homicide. It doesn't matter if the print's in blood. None of those things matter. To me, what matters is, can I see the fault line? Or if the ridges are changing from black to white in a print that Doreen was giving the example of, it's like, what information in the print tells you that the ridges are changing color? And so to me, those are the things that need to be documented. And I document them in more complex cases. But with the easy cases, there's no point. And if that case does go to court, the one in, I don't know, you can pick a number, 200 cases or 1 in 1,000 prints that go to court, if they ask me for it, I can do it at that time when they ask me. So when you do like a addition problem, you just give the answer. When you do a calculus problem, you can't just say the answer is 5. You actually have to do the work because calculus is more complex than addition. So that's the way I do my work, and that's the way I explain it. And in court, if they say, isn't it standard that you have to document what you saw that day? It's like, No, that's not a scientific premise to do that. The science says you have to show the support behind any conclusion in any field if somebody asks you. It doesn't say that it has to be done that way. So
For the, was it the Patterson case? So this is a while ago. Up in New England area, Boston, whatever, where the case was thrown out because she had not done bench notes on like that day of her analysis and examination.
I don't think it was Patterson. I think it wasn't Patterson the simultaneous impression
Was that it? Okay.
case, but I think it could be Langell. Langell was thrown out for a lot of different reasons.
Okay.
And I think it was thrown out 3 times, if I remember correctly.
Oh,
One
Okay.
time it was thrown out because they didn't do blind verification. The problem with that was it was in an SOP at their agency to do blind verification. So it wasn't the fact, and that was the same one where the judge ruled they didn't do contemporaneous documentation.
that was it.
So
That's it.
you're right.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Throw the case out because she didn't do contemporaneous documentation. They threw the case out because it was in their SOPs to do that. And she didn't follow her own
And
SOPs.
she didn't follow the SOP. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay.
Right. So that's how some of these court cases can be misconstrued of what they really said. Now, you also there's one more important element to that. In their SOPs, when it said you had to do contemporaneous documentation, that was in their crime scene SOP. When you're processing a car, write down what you did and when you did it. You know, it's really important to say, I got there at 10 a.m. I drew a sketch of the car. Then I black powdered the outside, then I black powdered the inside, things like that. But contemporaneous documentation is not necessary for the comparison process.
Okay.
And so when they showed her in court, here's your SOP that says you must do contemporaneous documentation, she was surprised. She didn't even know it was in her SOP because it wasn't. It was in their crime scene SOP. Like it's super important when you're processing. Did you do black powder first or did you do super glue first? The order is important, so you have to do contemporaneous documentation when you're processing.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So did we give you any answers on how we thought about the task relevant? You said you were still looking for some more information. And that was my first thing, was to be open and transparent about it, so that if I'm asked in court, oh, well, you didn't say you did that, but you're right, though.
Right.
You can't, when we went to accreditation, our caseload being completed went down because, for one thing, we had to get used to all the accreditation stuff, but then you're also taking more notes. There's more paperwork involved, right?
Mm-hmm.
To make sure you get the right product out the door. So I get it. But if you are a small department, you can do it. But if you're a big department, you're not going to be able to do it.
Right. And our agency is accredited. We don't do those things. So for a lot of agencies, it's not required by accreditation. Accreditation says follow your own rules. But if your agency makes a rule that you have to document all that, then you could say accreditation makes you do it. When it's really not accreditation, it's really the agency coming up with policies.
Okay. So what do you think? Do you think the having the matrix substrate, all that, is task relevant?
I think just the latent and the known is task relevant. That's it. And like when you're doing a proficiency test or a certification test, I don't recall one case where somebody's written in and said, I can't arrive at a conclusion on this certification test because I wasn't told the matrix or the substrate. Or one of the things on the list is the date the known prints were taken. It's like, I don't find that to be necessary. The OSAC document lists task relevant. How they define it is things that are necessary to do the comparison or the examination. Right. And it's like, I think all those things are interesting. And sometimes I'll ask, what was this on? What was it made from? Is it Lyscan? But I don't think it's necessary information. So to me, it should be a really small list. What is necessary? The latent and the known. The
Yeah, I
rest
agree.
is,
I hear you there.
yeah, the rest could be helpful, but not necessarily. Like if it's a window in a car, you want to know the direction because that'll help you orient it and make your whole search process faster. But if that wasn't given to me, then you search every direction of every print. It is what it is. But like I said, I wouldn't blind anybody to that information. I just also don't think we should be telling examiners that it's necessary to perform your job.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
I have another topic, if you want to go towards that one real quick. I just
Yeah.
have a question because it's kind of along these lines. Does your agency plot each latent print before they search it or anything? I mean, is that part of their analysis where they actually do a plot, either, gyro method or whatever?
We leave it to the discretion of our examiners. So no, there's no requirement that they do it.
Okay.
If they wanted to plot it, they could plot it. If they wanted to just take the print and run it through the computer and let the computer plot it, they can do that. It's the fastest way. You just run it through the computer. It searches it. If you get a hit, you've saved yourself a lot of time. If you don't get a hit, you might want to go back and replot it and clean it up a bit.
Okay.
But we leave it to the discretion of the examiner on how much effort they want to put out. And then our verification process is different than a lot of agencies too, because our verification process isn't confirming an identification. It's looking over the whole case and saying, is there anything in this case that could have been done better? So the verifier may give it back saying, I think you need to research this print through APHIS with a different orientation, or clean up the features a little bit and run it again.
Okay. Some agencies are they don't have a big caseload or anything, but they are like putting in, for instance, if they agree with a point, it's in green. And if they see it, if it's questionable, it's in yellow, the whole gyro thing. But so this is, I guess they're doing it so that they can say, this is what I saw on my initial analysis. And that takes, for me, I just think that takes, like if you have, a B&E of a motor vehicle and you have 50 latent prints, I really don't want to sit there and plot 50 latent prints before I even begin searching any of them. So I don't see the purpose in that. And that's why I was just wondering is if anybody does that. I would do it, I think, if I have a latent that is very difficult to see and I want to make sure it is of value. And if there's any red flags in it, that's going to tell me, hey, you have distortion or you have twisting or something.
Right. Or some features that the computer won't pick up.
Right.
And you want to clean it up. Yeah. The result of all this additional paperwork that agencies are having their examiners do is it's so time consuming. Now they're coming up with the new idea of doing limited examinations. And in that case, it has 50 prints, just doing 1 or 2. And I think it's better to look at every print and do it well, not thorough by overdoing things that look good, but really aren't good. But I'd rather do a case completely than to just search 1 or 2 prints and do overkill on those 2. I think there's a huge benefit to identifying everything in a case that you can.
I think probably when it comes to the idea of the limited is because we've been doing it. I've done it at an agency that I worked with before, and it was actually quite successful. And I think one of the things that it might be just a nuance on how we did it and why it worked so well with us was that when we said we were doing a limited, if we had the scenario with Doreen and she said 50 latent prints on a B&E or a burglar or whatever it was, we searched every single one of those. So the limited wasn't to imply that only 1 or 2 prints was going to be searched. All 50 were searched. And if we made an like let's say it hit to an individual, we would take that person's knowns and we would compare it against a print that was like on an interior surface. So the interior of the car or interior of the house, if there was one, or a point of entry window or something that seems like it could have some value for an investigator. We would identify that one, and then we would identify it, verify it, go through that whole process so that we could notify the investigator on that name and get it out there. And then we would kind of stop there. But if in the process of the reverse queue, because we had searched all the prints, another name popped up, then we would compare that one to that individual and identify it and then notify. And so the concept for us was that every print of value was searched. And if you hit 5 people in a burglary and you had 80 prints that were collected and you hit 5 people, you would identify one of those persons on the most interior-ish surface possible. That's not a word I know, but on the most inside print possible, the closest you could get, because you want to help give that investigative information, you know. And a lot of times it was really helpful in the situations where we had a lot of victim prints. So we would have a burglary case, we would hit the victim, you know, it's the same name on the envelope, is the same name that hit through APHIS. And we're like, okay, you know, there's 40 prints, we searched them all. This person came up on APHIS 17 times. We hit him 17 times. It's probably going to be the victim. We're going to go ahead and we're going to do that one. And we're going to let them know that that's all we've gotten. We've searched every print, and this is the only print that's identified, or the only person, I should say, that we've been able to identify. And then if they want us to come back at a later time and complete a comparison to a known suspect or individual, then we can do it then. But the whole concept was it's an abbreviated work process, and then we pause it. And typically the only time we were actually ever requested, out of the thousands and thousands and thousands of them that we did, the only time we were ever requested to actually complete a limited examination was in preparation for court. So it was very rare that we had investigators, and I'm going to say probably out of let's say 1,000 cases a year that we worked, just for an example, we maybe got 5 requests to complete, which told me that the information the investigators needed was what we were presenting to them, because if they needed more, we would have been inundated with these requests to finish the case, and we weren't. But the good thing is we did search every print. So if it
I think that's important.
Yeah. So I know some agencies would just, for some reason, maybe pick 1 or pick 2 and just do those, but you're leaving out a lot of information. And there were plenty of limited that we created that had multiple individuals identified. So there were plenty of times where I had these huge cases, and it was a property crimes case, but it looked like a homicide because it was so big and so thick, and there were so many envelopes, and we hit so many people on APHIS. It's like, oh my goodness gracious. So the ability to kind of, you know, get it down, I think was meaningful. And I think the other reason why it worked out well is that we could get that information out quickly to our investigators. And I could really see the impact it actually did have on public safety. We would send them an email after the verification process was done, send them an email with the location information and the subject's name. And within a day, there'd be another set of known standards that had come through the APHIS system, and that were reverse searching, and new hits that were popping out through reverse queue because they got a better set of knowns off of this arrest. And so now it would generate more cases. But I could absolutely see the difference in public safety when we started really streamlining these cases and getting them out. And a lot of times cases, it feels to me, begin with the, I shouldn't say cases, but like when the younger crowd starts, they tend to start with the property crimes, right? You tend to get the younger individuals doing the burglaries, the larcenies, the vandalisms. And if we get them into the APHIS system, and we search the prints and it's no hit because it's a juvenile, but then later on in life, when they continue their career in burglaries, and then they advance to something like an assault or a robbery, and now they're an adult and they get printed for the first time, all of a sudden that reverse queue just explodes. And that helped us out immensely, that we had all the prints in there, and we weren't just picking one or two, that we
Right.
were able to search every print in every case every time if it had value for search. Now, I know that there were some agencies that would say, well, it's not a value for APHIS, but it's a value for comparison. And that always kind of felt like, I get it. I can see how somebody would say, well, this is, if I try to submit this through APHIS, it's going to give me a candidate list, but I don't necessarily think that, you know, it's going to be tricky, but I can at least compare it. I can say, you know, maybe some level 1 information in there would be helpful. And I can say, you know, this is clearly an arch, and the subject that they want me to compare is all worlds. And, you know, maybe I can't identify it, but I could at least say, okay, that's not the subject, you know. So I know that came up. That was sometimes a little controversial as to whether or not a value for exclusion only of APHIS, of value for APHIS, or not a value for APHIS, but a value for comparison. So there's a lot of different ways that folks, I think, submit information into the database system. And I think for me, one of the reasons why I would try to be detailed in my notes is because I didn't want to forget. So 2 or 3 years later, I'd be like, why didn't I put that in APHIS? Or why didn't I? Like, and then I'd have to be like, oh, okay, now I remember, because I had written myself a little note just in case. 2 or 3 years later,
Right.
I would fall back on that.
Oh, yeah.
I agree. I think your policy for limited is great. But it's not what the recommendations are coming out with. They're just saying it's up to the agency to say what is limited. And then some agencies take that to mean we'll make one ID in every case and then move on.
Oh, that's not good.
No, it's not. And that's why, yeah. But
Yeah,
yours
no,
sounds perfect.
you
Sounds
should-
like it
you
works
should-
really well. Yeah.
Yeah, you should definitely search every latent, you know,
Mhm.
that is of value, you know, through the system. But
Mhm.
yeah, that doesn't mean that you shortcut as soon as you get one ident.
No,
get the case
no.
down.
I think when we were sitting down trying to figure out what was going to be the best approach, what was going to be the best strategy, how are we going to employ this? Because we had thousands of cases of backlog, and it was overwhelming to try to find a way to catch it up. But when we sat down and thought about it, it did not make sense to us to do the one and done approach,
Right.
because
Right.
it felt irresponsible. It felt like
Mhm.
we were neglecting, you know, the vast majority of the information in the case, and we couldn't do that. But like I said, on the flip side, when we told those investigators, if you want the rest of the case compared, let us know. And we never got those requests. They just never
Right.
generated. It's like once they got that name and they knew the initial location, that's all they needed. That's all they wanted. So I feel like it kind of satisfied both sides. It helped
Mhm.
us with our case flow. It helped them because it was quick, and you know, they weren't waiting 2 or 3 months. We could get it
Right.
out in a day or two.
That is good. How many
I think that really
detectives
did help a
though?
lot.
How many detectives have told you though in your career that as soon as they confronted the individual and said, "Hey, we found your print," they automatically confess and everything? So then they don't need anything else.
You know, to be honest with you, I never really got a lot of feedback other than to say, you know, thanks for the information. I never really got a lot of anybody telling me like the details. I
Okay.
don't know. Maybe it's because I was in a separate environment. And even now I'm kind of in a separate environment, and you knew these investigators, and I really never really knew them, I suppose.
Okay. Yeah. Quite a few of them would come up. Not quite a few, but the ones who would get back, they would say, thank you. And yeah, as soon as we brought him in to the room and started talking to him, he just, you know, spilled the beans, so to speak. So it's like, so that's why you didn't get a call back, because unless they try to recant right there on the stand, oh no, I didn't say that. Then you got to do the whole thing. But
I had an investigator once call me into, this was really early in my career, and I can remember this very distinctly. This investigator said, "Hey, Rebecca, can you please come into the interview room? We have a guy, you know, he's accused of something. I know we didn't get prints in the case, but I haven't told him that yet. I just told him that we're going to work prints. And can you just come in and like look at his fingerprints and like put your glass there and just say, oh yeah, that looks familiar. That looks, oh yeah, I see that whirl. I see that. Yeah, that looks like what we got at the scene." He's like, can you do that? I was like, oh my goodness. I felt so awkward. So I said, okay. So I go in there, and And the guy is just looking at me like, anyway, and the investigators, listen, this is the forensics person, and she's here to tell you that there's prints, and she's going to take a quick look at yours, and she's going to tell you what she told me. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh my goodness. Oh, that was awful. I was so on the spot. It was the most awkward thing. It was so awkward.
It was the whole, they lie, we lie thing, right?
I suppose. And it felt terrible. I was like, well, I see you have a world. You didn't know what that meant.
Did he end up confessing?
I don't know. I went back to the lab. I went back to my little hole, and I just never asked about that. It was such an awkward exchange. I did not enjoy that. I didn't enjoy that at all.
Was it Oscar worthy?
Probably not.
Not?
No. No, I don't think so. Not even a little bit. But I was young. I was probably like my mid-20s. I was trying. I didn't know. I was just like, okay, I'll try it. I feel goofy, but I'll try it. But all right. So
good.
I'm sorry.
That's pretty good. That's a good one.
Well, if he didn't ever ask her to do it again, then that probably shows it wasn't
It wasn't that great. I didn't do
Which
that
is
well.
good. That's a good thing.
I don't think the strategy works. I think this was actually the same situation, and this was not print related, but the investigator. So there was one investigator that was doing the interview, and another fellow that was standing out in the hallway watching through the mirror. And the guy that was in the room, he was, I guess, like raising his voice and being like, oh, aggressive, and maybe, playing the bad cop, I suppose. And then they took a few minutes, and he got some snacks, and he brought the snacks back, and he gave them to the subject that he was interviewing. And the guy next to me is like, so he's doing good cop and bad cop? He's doing them both? Because it was just, he was going from one extreme to another. Like, okay, you won't confess if I'm being mean. Maybe you'll say something if I'm being nice. So he gave him drinks, and he gave him treats, and then somehow I got pulled into it, and I just thought, oh my goodness. Yeah, that was interesting. But I think we're at the end of our time, if you can believe it. We are past our 45-minute time frame. So that went by fast.
Well, thank you for inviting me. That was a lot of fun.
Well,
I'm really excited that you were available to join us, and I'm looking forward to how this is going to move forward. I'm excited about it. I'm excited that Doreen is willing to do these crazy things with me.
yes.
And I'm excited that people are willing to indulge me and participate in things like this. And so we're very thankful for you, Michelle. I appreciate your effort and your time, and I appreciate how receptive you were to the idea.
Well, thank you. And thanks for taking the time to learn how to do all this. You did a great job.
You did, Rebecca.
Thank you. So I am going to make sure that this live stream is saved to the YouTube channel. So it's going to be available for folks to come in at a later time and maybe watch later. And we don't yet have a guest set up for episode 2. So if anybody has a suggestion, or maybe you yourselves would like to be a guest for episode 2, reach out to me and Doreen. You can actually reach us at our Gmail account. We have a minutiaetoi@gmail.com. So reach out to us through the Gmail account. Let us know if you have any suggestions, ideas, interests, somebody that you would like to maybe see on the podcast. We'll be glad to reach out to them.
Sounds good. And it wasn't that bad, right, Michelle?
No, it wasn't. It was very easy. Thank you. I'm almost worried about some of the emails you get with the that people want to participate in your podcast or more.
We'll
So
see.
keep us updated.
Yes.
We'll see how it goes. Like I said, it's an experiment, but it's all meant in good fun. It's meant just to kind of keep us connected, really, more
Yes.
than anything. It's just to keep us connected, and so we can put names and faces together when there's somebody that you see and you're not quite sure who they are. Be like, oh yeah, I saw that person, or I share an interest with that person or something. I just thought that it was a way to bring the community, keep the community going.
Nope.
I
Very
think
good.
it's a great idea.
You can't go wrong with sharing information. So
All right, I'm going to actually stop the podcast. Not the podcast, excuse me. I'm going to stop our stream. So for those that are watching on the stream or watching at a later time, this is where we say goodbye. So
Thank
thank
you.
you very much for popping in and spending some time with us. And I'm going to go ahead and stop that now. So we'll catch you in episode 2, y'all. All right. Stop streaming.
Bye.
All right.
Y'all. I like that y'all in there at the end.
Y'all.